By the time I became governor, she said, Lloyd, you should start a club on the South Side. Black people need a club. And again, I was still going through these problems of, why are you talking about black people? Nobody black knows how to speak. At that time, there were 2 people in Toastmasters who were African American. I was one. So I said, where am I going to get the help? She says, I will help you. Marcia lives in Roseville. I thought about it, and I said to myself, maybe there's something to that idea. So I got together a handful, about 5 people. We met in my family room, and that was the beginning of the Klassy Talkers. It was interesting because although I was reluctant, these people really wanted to do this. So I stepped back and I allowed it to happen. Now let me tell you what the meetings were like, because it was really a 3 rings circus, truly. Nobody wanted to speak. But everybody came for the show. The speakers that did speak, what's her name again? Ezalee McMillan. Yeah, she was one of the truly good speakers. She would get up and she spoke, and I said, you are educational vice president. There was a black guy who came, and I don't remember his name, and I said, you are president, and he fought. And I assigned to each person some kind of duty to do for that club. They all made it through the 6 months, and then Ezalee took over, and the club just blossomed. I mean, it was amazing. This was 1988. Here was a club that was less than 6 months, and Toastmasters was distinguishing it as one of its best clubs. But more than that, something unusual happened. Many of these people didn't have a place for their kids to go and see a show like this. So they asked me, can we bring our children to the meeting? And I said, well, yes, I don't mind. We were meeting at IHOP at Florin and 99 in the back room. I said, yeah, I don't mind. And everybody was bringing their kids. And then they told everybody else, and they brought their kids. And then they told everybody else, and they brought their kids. And the kids decided they wanted to speak music. And I said, well, I don't know if we can do that, because it's really for the members. The parents became so adamant that they told me essentially, go to the back room, this is our thing. But then I said, well, you know, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll give you 1 meeting out of the month where the kids could perform. And at every other time, we would have our regular meeting. And that's what happened. And you should have seen those kids. It was incredible. They took to it like flies to flypaper. They would come up in and would do the whole thing. You know what we all do? Mr. Toastmaster. That was the Toastmasters, but they were grandiose in the way they did things. Well, we got put out of that place because nobody was buying food. I tried, but it just did not work. Then, that was the first wave of the Klassy Talkers. Then the second wave came, of which Thelma and John came in. I would say Charlesetta came in wave 2.5, and Gene came in wave 3. These people were coming through, introducing themselves. They would get what they want, and then they would leave. And then another group would come, and it constantly fed up on itself. But I think everybody would tell you there was never a dull meeting in the Klassy Talkers. Never. And I think that was the reason why the club operated at such a high level. The talks were educational, Nobody had what you might call similar experiences. So we were all learning something new. John was our first pilot, and he would tell us about flying. And I was mesmerized. I got a little radio control plane right now, still trying to do what you do, John. But I haven't been good at it. But I'll give you an idea. Charles Zetta was one of our better speakers, one of the better speakers. John, I knew would be a contest person just by the way he started. Thelma was the grandiose, and she's the power speaker. Now, I wish I could remember the lady in the Senate the black lady in the Senate. What was her name? That's the way, who? No. In the U.S., the U.S. representatives. Jordan. That's the way Thelma was. Thelma would walk up to this lectern, and she would take over the room. You know, she would thunder and everything would shake. And I said, well, this woman is good. Our dentist came. He was always quiet and demure, but when he got behind the lectern, you would see another person flower out. And then when he sat down, he became quiet and demure again. And I never could understand it. It was always something about this lectern that made people thrust themselves forward and let us know what they were like. Now, Gene, I have to tell about you too. Gene was my hardest nut to crack. Jean loved the meetings, but she never wanted to speak. But finally, she did speak. And I said, now, why have you done this to us? Why haven't you introduced us to this beauty that you've been sitting on? And she said, I just have to see how it worked. And I later learned everybody had to move at his own pace. John reminded me of one lady who came in. John was the second person who was non-African American to come to the club. The first I won't mention. But the third was an Asian lady. You remember? The third was an Asian lady. She was advanced in age. She must have been in her early 60s at the time. Her name was Jean Kanemoto. You remember? Yes. She was like Jean also. She didn't want to speak right away. But you know, I was the type to try to coax people to engage. And then you could launch. When she gave her first speech, she was a natural. Now, her husband called me, about a year afterwards, and he said, Lloyd, I don't know what type of person you are, but this really has been a good experience for Jean. He later called me 3 years later and told me, Lloyd, Jean now has Alzheimer's. And it really hurt me because I saw all these people progressing, moving and doing what they had to do. And I think her time had been over. She had done what her job was to do. And she was moving to her other phase of life. Now, the Klassy Talkers was interesting, and it truly was my baby. I wanted you to know this because this was always a proud club. We had, I think they've taken some of them off. We had that many when I was there. And I was in the Klassy Talkers from 88 to 1990. And this thing was full. In fact, we had extension arms out the side. Everything from Toastmasters. We were a presidential distinguished club. There weren't 16 clubs in the whole Toastmaster land out of 6,000 clubs that had reached that distinguished level. But here was this little fumbling group, this little motley group of people who had this desire to want to express themselves to everybody. And they were just doing it. And it was a pleasure to watch them, as it is a pleasure for me to tell you about them.